And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome tonight to this special pre-launch Q&A, Brian Klingborg, here to give us the inside scoop on his brand new book, number 3 in the Detective Lu Fei series, The Magistrate. Brian, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me here. The Magistrate is set in the north of China in a city called Harbin, which is not far from the Russian border. And the plot concerns a group of corrupt officials who run one of the districts there, like their own little private fiefdom, enriching themselves at the expense of the people that they're supposed to be serving. And that's working out very well for them until a shadowy figure who calls himself or herself or themselves the magistrate starts to target them for some kind of vigilante justice, snatching them off the streets and meting out various kinds of medieval punishments. So, of course, this group, this cabal, this secret society of officials is quite concerned about this, not only because they're worried for their safety, but they do not want the real authorities to figure out why they might be targeted and to bring to light some of their nefarious activities. So they start running their own search for who the magistrate might be. And meanwhile, about 30 or 40 miles away in a small township called Raven Valley, you have Inspector Lu Fei, who's the protagonist of the series. And he's called to the scene of a murder where he discovers a body that's been set on fire and mutilated. And he discovers through his investigation that this is a criminal who is involved in a cyber sex ring based in Harbin. So Lu Fei's investigation takes him back to this city. Now, the city of Harbin in the north of China has some bad memories for Lu, because that's actually where he got his start as a police officer. And he was a rising star there until he caught his supervisor in a compromising position. So he was then fired and basically exiled to this smaller town. Now he finds himself back in Harbin, kind of ensnared in this net of vice and corruption and caught between these corrupt officials, his ex-boss, who's now the chief of homicide in Harbin, and this shadowy figure named the Magistrate.
Whoa. We have a lot to talk about. Medieval culture, corruption, sex rings, northern China, Russian influences, a detective with a shadowy past, the shadowy figure known as the Magistrate, whose lieutenants Zhang and Li are out kidnapping, torturing, marking, torching, lighting a fire, torturing and torching various bodies. Brian Klingborg, we got a lot to talk about. So I can't wait to dive right in. But first, I just want to welcome everyone, because we are broadcasting live to 6 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So mystery and thriller loving friends, no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right place. It is the right time. It is Mystery Monday. And because Mondays can be murder, we're here to make them a little less painful for you. If you've been here before, you know the drill. And so does the Magistrate. But if you're new here, here's the drill. So every Monday, I give you my hand-picked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. So Brian has an undergraduate and graduate degree in Asian studies. He's lived in China. I know I have a lot of questions about these characters, about world building, and there's a lot of praise that this book is earning, which I want to kick off with. So while you're thinking of your questions, type them in the chat box. I'll get them right over to them. To Brian. So I want to kick off with this praise from Kirkus, Brian. They call this a complex, challenging crime yarn. Now I'm going to pop that up so we can all look at this. So you've got a lot of characters here. In fact, you start out with a character map at the beginning of the book, and then all of those characters have live in their worlds. So let's talk about your process in creating this complex, challenging crime yarn. Are you a plotter, or do you live in a beautiful mind kind of house with giant Post-its all over? Does this just come to you? How do you keep track of it? Give us tell us all the things.
I am a compulsive outliner. I outline and then I jettison and I outline again and I write. So my process is generally, a little chaotic, even though I always set out to be very organized. I try to come up with a plot. I try to come up with certain important plot points and maybe the direction that we're going. And I will outline that, and I will do a lot of research. These books require a lot of research. I'll do a lot of research to try and fill in certain gaps. I'll spend days and hours looking up what may be minor facts that inform the novel, and some that I end up never using anyway. What kind of cars do people drive? What is the most popular meal in the north of China? Lots of different things like that. Anyway, I'll outline, I'll start writing, and then I'll find about a third of the way through that something's not working. I'll throw out a bunch of stuff, and it's not until I get probably 2/3 of the way through the book and I'm in the home stretch that I have a more fully fleshed out idea of what I'm doing. So I'm constantly going back and rewriting. I figured out that I probably rewrite every word in every book at least 7 to 10 times by the time I'm done. So it's just constantly rewriting and going back and polishing.
Wait, have you counted those 7 to 10 times? Have you counted those 7 to 10 times? You're like, oh, there it is. 8, 9, and 10.
You're a bit frozen there,
Oh,
Sarah,
no.
unfortunately.
Weird. Okay. You're not frozen
Okay.
for me.
Okay, I hear you now.
The 7 to 10
Okay.
times are you like, oh yeah, there I am getting to my 7 times, getting to my 10 times? I mean, or it just happens to be that many?
No, I just over time have kind of learned my method, and that seems to be what it ends up to be.
This is Lu Fei number 3 in 2
Yes.
years. So how long does it take you to do all of this research, which you're saying, some of which doesn't even make into the book, looking up everything from the most popular meal in China to what does a torture chair in the back of a kidnap mobile
Right.
look like?
Right.
What is the Chinese symbol for thief? I mean, I'm guessing all of these things had to be researched. So with that level of detail, with that level of research, plus the 7 to 10 times of rewriting, how long does it take you?
I've averaged about 8 months to write a draft, and then another 2 months to just keep polishing it over and over again, and then I'll send it to the editor, and then so basically a year-long process, but 8 to 10 months for most of the writing.
That seems really fast to me.
I have my schedule is that I try to write 2 pages 5 days a week. I don't always make that. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but that's what I psychologically aim for, and that's what keeps me on track. And if I don't reach those 10 pages a week, I feel guilty. So, it forces me to get back to it.
What do you do to assuage your guilt?
Nothing. Sometimes you just don't have it, sometimes the ideas don't come. Sometimes you hit a roadblock. Sometimes you're tired. Writing is, as they say, it's a lot of perspiration and inspiration, but I wouldn't say it's 90-10. I'd say it's more like 30-70. You have to be inspired. Otherwise, you're just putting words on a page. And sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I know that this section isn't working, the scene isn't working, but I have to get it down so that I can move on. And then later on, I'm going to come back and rewrite it anyway.
Interesting. So, Brian, let's talk about some of this other this other praise. Publishers Weekly raves, quote, expertly rendered, and calls you exceptional. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So let's talk about this expertly rendered exceptional book that you have given to us. So you've led us into some of your excruciatingly careful research down to the most popular meal in China. How about when you lived there? Are you recalling the smells, the sights, what it's like to be in a bar? You're looking up how many, is it yuan, a dress, a dress, a bag, and a scarf cost? Are you how else are you bringing excellence to the page?
Right. So, I did study Chinese culture, language, cultural anthropology, which allowed me to study a lot of different disciplines, all related to East Asia. And so that informs kind of the background. It informs the mindset of the characters. I've tried to make my characters relatable to an American audience or a foreign audience, but still quintessentially Chinese. I've tried to be true to them and create a Chinese worldview for them as much as possible. So the way that they react to things that they encounter. I lived in Taiwan, but that was 150 years ago. So everything changes so quickly in Asia. I do remember what it was like to be there. I remember what it was like to be, the smell of a humid October night and cold beer out in the night market with a steaming bowl of, hot pot and things like that. So I remember all those things and have experienced them. I worked in a Chinese company and had a lot of Chinese colleagues and Chinese friends. So, that informs the stories. But as far as like the prices, modern prices, locations of things, what kind of clothes businessmen wear now, all of that is basically research, hours and hours of research.
Yeah, because it's interesting because I've never been to China. I've been to Southeast Asia, but I've never been to China. And yet it felt deeply, authentically Chinese to me in whatever, and I don't even know how it did, but it felt sort of in the care and the carefulness and the politeness and the, I don't want to say rigidity, but the formality perhaps of
Yeah.
the interactions, while also dealing with the underlying corruption, which felt very Russian. I could feel that influence. So I loved it. Let's get into some of the questions. Renee joining us. She says, hi, Sarah and Brian from gorgeous Southeast Florida. Thank you. She says, sorry for being late. You're not late. You're right on time. And she has a question for you, Brian. She wants to know, what intrigued you about China and Asia, Brian? Great question, Renee. Tell us, Brian.
Yeah. So I come from a very small town in California called Atwater, right next to Merced. Merced has 50,000 people. Atwater had 11,000. And so it was a small town. My father was a veterinarian, and we were there because his specialty was dairy cattle. So curse him. But anyway, so I grew up in this small town, and that was a long time ago. There wasn't much to do. There were only 3 television stations. There was no such thing as an internet. So I read a lot, and that was kind of my way of exploring the world long before I ever got to explore the world. And I always liked books that not only told a good story, but that taught me something about, it could be history or some other kind of culture, and it allowed me to explore. So when I went to college, I instead of studying Spanish, which you could either do Spanish, French, or German, I decided to take Chinese, and I really enjoyed it because like many Americans, I didn't have any strong cultural traditions. We're Swedish and Irish, but we don't do anything Swedish and Irish. We don't speak any languages at home and that sort of thing. So the thing about Chinese language is the culture and the language are so closely embedded in one another.
Ooh.
Even in terms of the forms of address for your friends, for example, you might call one friend older brother and another friend younger brother, and all sorts of things like that. And I just really enjoyed the cultural aspects of such an, at the time seemed to me a very exotic thing and very interesting. And spent my junior year abroad in Taiwan and just loved it. It was amazing. So just kept going, basically. And that was that.
But let's go a little deeper, because to Renee's point, it's not your average American Joe who would choose to study Chinese instead of Spanish. So was there a book, in that small town childhood, that you were like, wow, I have to study that culture, learn that language, go to that place? Like, what about this culture? What about this language? It's so interesting.
Well, so the real story is that growing up, some of the books I read were James Clavell's books. He wrote Shogun, he wrote Taipan, he wrote Noble House, and I read those books. Taipan was about the founding of Hong Kong in 1842 after the Opium Wars. And when I went to college, I lived in the dorm, and my roommate, who knew everybody in the dorm, told me one day, "Hey, I'm going to go up to the third floor where there's this cute girl that I'm trying to date, and she's got a cute roommate. Why don't you come up?" So I went up, and this cute roommate, who I later married many years later, grew up in Hong Kong. So she's Vietnamese by birth, but went to an American school, so culturally American. But, so I'm this small town boy from California who meets this exotic woman who grew up in Hong Kong, and she had a poster on her wall of Hong Kong. And I looked at the poster. I said, "Oh, Hong Kong ceded to the British in 1842 after the Opium Wars." And she was amazed because she'd only been in the US for 3 days and had never met anybody who knew where Hong Kong was, let alone any of the history behind it. So she, of course, was part of the inspiration that really sent me down the rabbit hole of studying Asian culture.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting. Renee saying she remembers reading those books in high school as well. And thank you for answering her questions. Look at that, Renee. You asked a question, and now you know that you have this in common with Brian Klingborg. That's so cool. Y'all, I want to tell you, Brian is coming on to give us the inside scoop about this book. It is not even out yet. This is a special pre-launch Q&A that we are here to pick his brain, to get to know all the things about the Magistrate. And the book is now available for pre-order. So you can order the book right here. I'm going to pop it up. So no matter where you're watching from, on Facebook or YouTube, here is that link. Pre-order The Magistrate tonight, and the good folks at Murder by the Book will send it right out to you. Now, I do let people submit questions in advance, Brian, and one of the questions I got was, does a reader need to read Lu Fei book 1 and 2 first to get a fuller experience out of this, or can they just dive right in? What are your thoughts on all of that?
They can dive right in. The story is unique, but the characters do reoccur. And one of the things I've tried to do is have story arcs, character arcs. So some of the characters will be experiencing some growth and some changes in this third book. And if you haven't read the first two, you might not know their backstory, but it's not going to detract from enjoying the plot of this book. So
they can dive right into book 3, but they'll learn more about the character arc if you do start with book 1 and 2.
Yes.
Okay, we're getting lots of hearts up on that answer. Thank you guys for that. Now, Brian, how many books, another question submitted, how many books do you plan to write in the series? Are we talking Patricia Cornwell? Are we talking Scarpetta, 36 books? Is it 3 and done? Give us the scoop.
I would like to continue it, but the reality of publishing is that you have to sell books to make books. So the first two haven't really sold very many copies. They've gotten some good praise and earned some fans, but I think they occupy kind of an odd intersection in mystery books. So I, out of an abundance of caution, have kind of wrapped up some of the story threads in book 3. But let's say, for example, book 3 really takes off. I'm ready to write as many as people want to read.
So you would keep going. You would do 36 Lu Fei books.
I think 36 would be a lot. Probably more like 10 would probably do it. At some point, these characters actually in each book, they do grow and change. So instead of a set mystery thing where you're just plopping the characters into a scenario where they're solving another crime, there's a trajectory to what is going on. And eventually they'll outgrow the trajectory, or the books will come to a natural end, I think.
So are you already thinking about who you will write next? If you, will you step away from Lu Fei and go write somebody else and then come back and then write more? Or you're like, will you try to have multiple series going, or what's that?
So of course, any writer, it's nice to have published 3 books, but I'd really like to keep it going in some fashion. And, So at this point, I'm kind of having to turn towards writing a different book, starting a new series, and I'm not really ready to talk about that just yet because my method is I have to get through a lot of pages before I really figure out what the core of the story is and what's really going on. So I'm working on that. Uh, I'm working very hard, and I hope by the end of the year I will have a draft. And then I'll come back and I'll talk to you about it. But for right now, it's a little too early to say.
Would you say that's because you're superstitious?
No, I just know that my first couple drafts are bad. And then after that, I catch the thread and I know what's going on and they get better. So a lot of things that I have now will probably change in the process of writing.
Excellent, excellent. Renee says this series sounds incredible, right? Doesn't it? Doesn't it, Renee? And I'm very curious what else you're cooking up there, Ryan, which we can't wait to hear about. But meanwhile, BookPage awarded this book a starred review. Congratulations on that. Raving about your ability to create nonstop action, suspense galore, fascinating locale, and compelling characters. So let's dive a little bit more into those 4 components of this book, which BookPage based their starred review upon. So first of all, nonstop action. So as a compulsive plotter, which you have revealed yourself to be, you have confessed here to the Mystery and Thriller Maven audience. Are you looking at your compulsive outline and saying, ooh, more suspense here on the front end, more suspense here in the middle, or oh, too much, pedal it back, I'm giving the reader adrenal exhaustion? Like, what are you, how do you step on the gas but also brake?
Yeah, I think that's really a product of what the plot requires. And each of the 3 books are a little bit different. The second book was kind of an international anti-James Bondian kind of thing where Lu Fei went undercover into Burma to explore illegal animal trafficking. And that was a lot of action. This book was a lot of investigation, police procedural with a very, energetic climax, basically. And that's just what the plot required in order to tell the story. If I want to tell a story about corruption, I have to explore corruption. I have to set the stage, and I have to have a story arc. Then, luckily, I have the magistrate doing bad things, and you can interject those to add tension and so on. But yeah, for the most part, it's kind of a ramping up of tension, and then boom, at the end, it gets very explosive.
Ooh, well, I want to talk a little bit more about this, but meanwhile, we have a great question, which is, does Murder by the Book carry all of your books? And the answer to that, yes, ma'am, they sure do. So right here, you can get Thief of Souls. I'm going to pop that right here in the comments, which is book number 1 in the Lu Fei series. So here is that one. And then number 2, I'm going to pop that in as well, which is Wild Prey, which is Lu Fei book number 2. And I'm going to pop that in as well as out soon, Lu Fei number 3, The Magistrate. Thank you for that wonderful question, Renee. And yes, I'm so glad to say that the store does. And so here again, I'm going to pop up Lu Fei book 2. Oops, I lost it because they're going too fast. Here is Lu Fei book 2. And you can also search by Brian's last name, Klingborg. But here is that direct link for Lu Fei book number 2 to get you all ready for The Magistrate. Thank you for that wonderful question, Renee. I appreciate you so much. Margaret Bernard joining us live from Portland, saying, loving your spring flower vlogs, Sara. Murder May Monday indeed. Oh, thank you for appreciating how I am juxtaposing cherry blossoms and the violent murders that are Brian Klingborg's. I know. Did you notice how I was like, and here we have the cherry blossoms. A violent murder draws a charred body, draws Detective Lu Fei to the scene of the crime. But here's a beautiful daffodil. I was trying to create a fun juxtaposition. So thank you for picking up what I'm putting down. um, Brian, let's talk a little more about the third and fourth components of that starred review, which is the compelling characters and the fascinating locale. So, having lived in Taiwan, you have immersed yourself in Taiwanese culture, also through your rigorous research, spending hours or sometimes days drilling down to those details, enriching the story. What about the compelling characters? How did you render this big cast?
Yeah, so when you're writing a mystery, as you know, you generally are going to have a central character. They're going to get the most of the time, most of the pages, most of your attention. You have your villains. My goal with villains is always to render them as three-dimensionally as possible. I'm not into the one-dimensional guy who's 100% evil. Everybody who does something bad in my books must be motivated to do it for some particular reason, not just because they're nasty people. Those may not be noble motivations, but still, I'm trying to round them out a little bit. And because I'm using these books as not only a way to tell a story, but also to explore a lot of different facets of Chinese culture and society, I've tried to have an ensemble characters which allow me to explore some of those things. So I have, for example, a young female constable who features Sun, or Sun is her name, who features a lot in this book. And she's turning 30 and is feeling pressured to get married because, traditional Chinese culture is you get married and you have children. So that's my way of exploring that kind of topic. And so, yeah, I'm basically trying to create a well-rounded, likable character with Lu Fei, but also make sure that, as I said, he's true to his culture. He was born in the 80s in China, and there were certain things going on there. And that's what has informed his worldview, although he spent some time in the US and speaks passable English so that he understands American mentality and stuff. But basically, I am really trying to not just make a, paper cutout of a Chinese person and impose my thoughts on it. So I spend time thinking about how he might perceive the world. And then these other characters that surround him, some are comedic relief, some are to move the plot along, some are to explore these other facets of Chinese culture. And, some are just his foils, like his chief. So he's a deputy chief in this small town, Lu Fei, and his chief, who's his senior, is this kind of lazy guy who goes to karaoke and drinks a lot of beer and kind of leaves things to Lu Fei. Yet,
yes,
this guy has a certain amount of wisdom, and when called upon, he's got Lu Fei's back and also pulls him out of issues or problems that Lu Fei gets himself into. So, I'm trying to make everybody as well-rounded as possible and interesting as possible.
So speaking, so beer drinking does feature somewhat prominently in your book, Brian. I was like, Brian likes beer.
I do like beer, yes.
What's your favorite local dish to eat?
So when I was living in Taiwan, we used to go get it's kung pao. So you're familiar with kung pao chicken, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we would get kung pao shrimp and basically spinach stir fried with garlic. Qing chao jie la cai. Delicious. Spinach, kung pao shrimp, and rice. Perfect meal.
Oh, that sounds perfect. And sometimes they use pea pods, right, instead of spinach, or
yes.
Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, so good. Oh my goodness, we are out of time. Renee saying yummy. I know, now I'm hungry and I want to go order Chinese food. I think we should all order Chinese food and then tag Brian in our pictures. Brian, thank you so much for coming on and for giving us the scoop. What is one secret that you've never told anyone about this manuscript or your writing process or your time in Taiwan?
Oh boy.
Spill your guts here,
I
my
think,
friend.
well, I think the secret is that nowadays you can really do a huge amount of research online, whereas in the old days you had to read, you had to go to the library and get books. But even to the extent that I'm able to call up Google Maps, and if I want to create a fictional town, I can call up Google Maps. I can look at a real town in China. I can see how it's laid out, and I can just kind of extrapolate from that. So, yeah, the internet has really been quite a boon to the research process.
Ooh, or
It's a
maybe
dirty
you
little
need to
secret.
go back to China to really get boots on the ground and kung pao shrimp in your
Absolutely.
belly to really immerse yourself. I feel like that's a necessary, you know, part of your research for book number 4.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you
Thank
all for
you.
spending your Mystery Monday with us. Don't forget to order The Magistrate. Pre-order tonight, and the good folks at Murder by the Book will send it as soon as the book drops. Renee saying thank you for being here tonight, Brian and Sarah. Thank you for joining us. Thank
Thank
you
you,
all for
Renee.
joining us. And I'll be back at the top of the hour with Jamie Lynn Hendricks. Stay tuned.